Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm the Gnarly Gnome. This is Cincy Brewcast. It's the voice of Cincy Craft, and this show's a little bit different. Well, it's not that different. We're still sitting around drinking beer and talking about beer-related things, but I want to go down a whole different rabbit hole with this one. I'm sitting with Adam Mills, now of not of Cartridge Brewing anymore from the last time you guys heard him on the show, now at Sonder Brewing, also here in Mason. But we're going to take a different look at some of the things that you do, because you do this whole other side of beer things that I love, obviously.
Well, that's kind of you.
Content creation is something that I feel extremely passionate about. It's what I've done for a living since I was in high school. I just didn't really know that's what it was yet.
Sure.
And feel very strongly about it. And you have done just an incredible job of bringing the world of content creation and Cincinnati beer together. And I want to talk about that. We'll probably talk about some of the stuff that's happening here at Sonder also. But welcome back to the show. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
This is probably fourth time on this show.
Might be.
And then you were also on an episode of Drinking with the Gnome, which I promise everybody that loves that show, it's coming back. I have 3 episodes that are recorded. I just have to get them put together and get it all figured out. They're coming. We'll probably talk about that difficulty too. But welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words.
It's great to see you here at Sonder. I think that you fit in with this team here wonderfully. You are definitely you are one of my favorite people to talk about beer with, because number one, you're so passionate about it, but number two, you're so great at explaining things about beer. You're one of those guys that every time I sit down at a bar and I order a beer that there's something about it that I'm unfamiliar with, or that I want to know more about, I want you sitting next to me to explain it to me.
Well, that's kind of you.
Man, is it weird to just call Adam right now and ask him to explain this beer to me?
Well, no, and I mean, I think it's part of that interesting thing where, beer and the whole culinary thing go so well together, and that's one of the fun things about it. Beer can be something as simple as just enjoying drinking it or taking a deep dive on, right?
Well, you can take the exact same beer, and one day you can drink it and just not think two things about it.
Yeah.
You're just hanging out with a friend, you're drinking, you're experiencing whatever else is happening around you, and the beer just becomes a catalyst for that experience. And then another time you can sit there and just really dive into that beer, and like you get a quarter through the pint, you're like, all right, I got to start pulling out books and see what I can figure out about this, and it just then takes you down a rabbit hole. It's fun that way. We've never really gotten a chance to sit down and kind of talk about your story though either, because there's always been so many other things happening around you being on the show. How did you get started with? Let's start with beer. Let's start from the very beginning. What was the first beer that you had? Do you remember?
Gosh, I mean, I'm sure it was a macro lager of some kind when I went to school in Southeast Ohio, college in Southeast Ohio. So I was drinking Schaefer Light back then.
Where did you go to school?
Franciscan University.
Okay.
It's over in Steubenville. It's like 5 minutes from Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And back then, I mean, Schaefer Light was the cheapest 6-pack you can get your hands on. And I mean, kind of from there, just I think a pretty normal path that people have. And then ended up finding other things. I think I remember one of my first times not having, like explicitly macro light lager was like Amberbach or something like that.
Yeah.
Was that a Michelob product?
It was.
I think so,
There was this really cool period of time, even like in fairly recent history, where Bud, who owns InBev, whatever you want to call them, who owns Michelob, brought back this whole line of Michelob beers that were all malt beers that were like these traditional styles. Like this was like in like I was definitely of legal drinking age, so I mean, I was buying it legally, and so that had to be within the last. Actually, I guess that's been a little while. That I think about it, it might have been like 20 years ago.
Sometimes,
oh man,
things go by fast.
Yeah, the Michelob was kind of a weird little shining star within macro beer for a while.
And then I found that then you find out that beer can be really strong. And I started getting into, some winter warmers type beer, some Belgians. I was really big into all the Trappist beers and stuff like that.
But
And then
still
and then
imported kind of stuff. Okay.
And then the bottle shop that I was going to had a really good imported selection. And then I found, it blew my mind that there was stout other than Guinness, right? Other than that dry, bitter, lean body beer, right? That dry stout. And then I found, sweet stout with moccasins. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is round and sweet and chocolatey, roasty. You know what I mean? And so those beers were eye-openers. I came to hoppier beers, more bitter beers a little bit later.
Was this still, at this point, like still kind of college age, or was this later than that?
This was later. This was a little bit more when I started getting into home brewing. I used to my wife and I used to have an Oktoberfest party to meet some friends together when we were a young married couple. And one year I had a friend say, well, next year you should make the beer for, the party. So that kind of started the whole thing,
right?
And I started getting a few beers and then seeing kind of what I wanted to chase. And we had an amazing homebrew shop in the Grand Rapids area back then called Siciliano's. Still there, still amazing. And so you could go and get a ton of different beers. The homebrew supply side was amazing. And that was really before, online ordering.
A home brewing shop and bottle shop kind of in the same. That's perfect.
Oh, it was perfect. So like you could try different styles. You could see like, the pre-made recipes that they had available and then buy a corresponding style to it. So it was really a cool. It was really a cool thing. And then just kind of dove in. Once I got into actually home brewing, that's what really fueled my interest in all different beer styles, because I got very quickly into competition brewing, and then there's so many styles that you can compete in. So that's why I started chasing right there, and then that was kind of it.
So when you were home brewing, were you still sticking to like traditional styles, like? Or,
100%.
Were you branching out?
No, 100%. So I got into the book when we were talking about earlier. I got into the
gummy worms or anything going into your beer.
There was no Fruity Pebbles and anything. I got into brewing classic styles. Jamil Zainashev and John Palmer. That was linked through the Brewing Network, which was the podcast that I really still probably learned the super majority of what I know about brewing. It was really the bedrock of my brewing education. And I would take that book, and because I was brewing for competition, very rapidly I was only brewing for competition, and I was using those recipes to hit styles. And it's remarkable, especially when you look at classic styles. When you go back to that book and you look at IPA and some other things, the styles have grown and shifted. But if you look at historical styles that are in that book, you're going to nail it. Those are some killer recipes. So that was kind of how I built my understanding flavor palette wise of the raw ingredients and whatnot.
It's still so fascinating to me to think about, like, when you talk about especially competition brewing and like you're trying to hit a style, and like when you read the style guidelines and it tells you what the beer is supposed to taste like, at the very bottom there's examples like, here's what this is.
Yes.
So like there is a beer out there that is the perfect version of this, and everybody's just trying to do that. And like the fact that everybody can even take the same recipe, and everybody can go home and everybody can make the exact same recipe, and there's still such a difference from beer to beer to beer and batch to batch to batch.
Sure.
That like it's not to take away from the gummy worm IPAs of the world, and like that's all fun, and like I get that side of what beer is, but like this side of like traditional beer is so fascinating to me that like it comes down to all of these other factors, to the ingredients that you're putting in there, to the time that each step is, like all of those little, every step like factors into what that end result is. And like I love that. That's fun to me. It's like I can have just as much fun sitting there and drinking on 4 different versions of the exact same stout.
Yeah. Well, and even the water here. And you mentioned how close Sonder is to Mainville.
Great example.
Our water profiles vastly different from cartridge to
I
here.
have long had on my list of I have a list of show topics that I want to hit one of these days, and I want to do a water show.
Sure.
And I have no idea how to do it. Because it sounds like it would be the most boring show in the world, but like that idea is fascinating to me. Like, I don't know if in any breweries that are listening, write this on some kind of whiteboard somewhere. I want the same beer made at 2 different breweries with 2 different water profiles, so that I can just illustrate the difference difference between the two.
Well,
Even
years
better,
ago,
the same brewery. If you want to make the beer with 2 different water profiles, please do it.
Sure. Well, years ago, I did a beer for John Palmer for HomebrewCon when it was in Grand Rapids. And so we did 2 pilot batches that were identical but just different water profiles.
That's awesome.
And it was really very, very cool.
The
It was a
closest
big
that
eye-opener for me.
Closest that I've ever come to that, if you go down to Asheville and go to White Labs, you can go in there and you can try the same beer with different yeasts. And it kind of gives you this really great illustration of how big of a difference the yeast plays.
100%.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that. I don't think a lot of people even, you go down, you stand at the bar downstairs and you talk to people. I'm pretty sure that most of those people don't even, they understand that there's different hops in different beers.
Sure.
And then maybe half of them understand there's different malts. What percentage of people even understand that there are different types of yeast that make? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's something that I don't think about a lot, but the water profile is just the very bottom of that thing. People have no clue. Okay, so how do you get into commercial brewing from there? You're home brewing, and you just decide one day that, you know what, I've been on this career path my whole life, and it's something that I clearly enjoy because it still kind of factors into what you're doing now. But I just want to go make beer.
Yeah. So really, I was, when I was doing the competition thing, I was doing it kind of crazily. I was toward the end, I was entering, anywhere between 30 and 38 beers per competition. And I was really only brewing for competition. I would brew, bottle the beer, cellar it. For beers that I could sit on, beers that had to be fresh would be brewed right before a competition. Right. Blah blah blah. So it was insane. And so through the homebrew thing, through the success that I had in homebrew competitions, and then I was active in the beer judging community as well. It put me on the radar for a brewery that was opening in my town. And then I ended up leaving. I taught for 10 years prior to making the change over to brewing professionally.
So the brewery reached out to you and said, "Hey, you like this beer thing?"
Yeah, so I did reach out to them, but he did say when I sat down with him, he said, "You're somebody," because the local paper had just done a write up on me. So gotcha. Yeah, that was what we kind of put us together.
And so from there, your story gets you here to Cincinnati with Cartridge when they were starting up.
Yep.
And then from there, you're here to Sonder, and that's where you're at in your career right now as far as
Definitely.
The brewing career.
Yeah.
But there's this whole other side that I think is really cool and really fascinating, and that's the content creation side. Adam Makes Beer. If anybody does not know about Adam Makes Beer, search for it on every social media platform that I can think of.
Yeah.
Are you on TikTok?
I'm not on TikTok.
You should be on TikTok.
I know I should. I need to multiply myself to do that, though. So, yeah.
It's the same shorts. You just re-up a little
I know.
What other obscure social media platforms are there right now? There's all kinds of. There's Blue Sky. Have you heard about this one?
No.
It's just Twitter. It's Twitter, just on a different platform. There's the old Snapchat. I still have never figured out how to do that as a content creator, but I'm sure there's a way. Just search for him wherever you are, and if he's not there, send him an email and tell him he needs to be on TikTok or whatever it is that you love. I don't think anybody that listens to this show actually loves TikTok. I think a lot of them might be on it, but nobody loves it. And you have taken kind of these two sides of your working life and kind of brought them together with teaching and beer. And I will put out the warning right now. If you are not a brewer, some of the content will not make any sense.
Sure, yeah. Well, and that's kind of the thing. So there's kind of two halves to what I do. So if somebody if you're a craft beer lover and you want to kind of see the behind the scenes, if you go into my playlist on YouTube, there's full, a lot of times people say like grain to glass brew days, right?
Right.
And so you can see the pro side equipment I'm working with. I basically talk to you like I'm coaching you through a brew day. And I really take I really take it to heart, like, from my perspective, when I'm talking about beer I'm making, I will share really everything because I learned everything from somebody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's only so much reinventing the wheel when it comes to beer. And, sometimes we can try to color outside the lines a little bit or whatever. But I think, for me, it's like, I was listening to great brewers talk about how they did their thing, and that's how I learned. So
well, they're
try to pass it on.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but the process of making beer, there haven't been a lot of process innovations in recent history. I mean, there's been a couple, especially you talking New England IPA and kind of where hops are going into a beer. Maybe that's a bit of an innovation, but the process of making beer is about the same as it's been for thousands of years.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And like I feel like when people are making double IPA, I think probably prior to hazy, the last big one of the last big step forwards was when viniculars at Russian River started to do double IPA with Pliny the Elder, and I think still a lot of people, I mean, that recipe is out there, and I think a lot of people are still making homages to that beer when they make double IPA.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of my take with it.
I haven't had a double IPA in a long time that I think is even thinking about Pliny. I think that all the double IPAs I've had recently, it goes to this other kind of hazy side.
Yeah, and that's a different animal for sure, right?
And they just call them double IPAs, and we don't know the difference anymore.
Well, it's tough with hazy,
if
right?
I order another hazy West Coast IPA, I'm going to lose my mind.
When I think on some level with hazy, really all that comes down to is the volume of alcohol, right? Because the whole concept behind hazy is I think hazy IPA is a call for approachable IPA.
Sure.
And so it's not like you're going to jack the bitterness up a ton, because the heart of that style is being drinkable, right? So you have to kind of do this weird balancing act of it's still expected to be more bitter than standard hazy, right? But then you start walking a line to where you're getting out of what hazy is.
Right.
Yeah.
How do we end up here where we're talking about the nuances of the word hazy? So this side of trying to, you're not trying to necessarily what's a good way, democratize the craft beer process. You're not trying to make it easy for everybody to understand. You're just trying to bring people along with kind of your process day to day.
Yeah, and I think there's two parts to it, because early on when you're thinking about trying to do like a content creation thing, I never wanted to say, oh, well, like, this is how you make robust porter. This is how you make IPA. For me, it's a little bit more of, if you want to like actually break it down to a story, what my channel is on from one standpoint, there is an element of democratizing information. There is one level of that, because I think sometimes the curtain is a little heavy between the brew house and the consumer, and sometimes even brewery to brewery, different things like that. So I think there is one element of that. As I mentioned before, I think the average craft beer consumer, the person that wants to watch, that has an interest in like the how it's made type stuff, some of my content works for that. But there's another element. I used to go on. I mean, at this point, really, YouTube is second to Google as far as the search engine goes.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those things where there would be times where
I would almost argue that it's. Yeah, I mean, second would
sure,
but like it's part of Google.
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
When you Google something, one of the very first things that comes up is a section with YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's built into it. Like I think most people, when they're searching for something, would rather watch the video about it than read about it.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the other thing, where there was times where when I came down and I was helping to get cartridge going, it was like, well, all right, well, I don't know anybody down here, by and large, right? Let me jump on YouTube, let me see what there is for this. And there's not a ton of stuff. There was a channel a few years back called Brewery Life, and a guy, Jasper, super nice guy, and he was talking about what he was doing in the brew house. That channel has been defunct now for at least a few years. There's a fella out of Australia, rockstar brewer, Hendo. I just interviewed him on one of my podcasts. He's a great guy. He has some YouTube content as well. But my goal was to, if somebody wants to apprentice into this industry, which I think is one of the things that's cool about it, they could at least have a baseline of what the heartbeat of the brewery is like and what the labor is.
Right.
And for somebody that's looking to open a brewery too, letting them know what the labor is, because sometimes people still have this impression that the brewer's pouring grain from hand to hand and smelling things.
that commercial with Jim Cook with the hops.
Exactly.
Yeah, this back to work and you toss them in the kettle.
Yeah, so I think it is important for people to have that understanding. And I also had some level of understanding of the market. That market is not saturated.
Right.
I'll put it that way. It's not like there's a dearth of professional brewing YouTube channels.
Well, I saw it a little bit. So, I mean, the YouTube channel that I have is unique in that there's not much of a market for it at all. It's just me going around drinking. And
Okay.
there's not many people that want to watch that. But I made a video one time where we were making that year's version of Big Sis, and the way I titled it was "Let's Make a Beer," and then some other kind of tagline off of that. And immediately, like, you could see the spike in traffic right off the bat of people that click on it because they want to see somebody make a beer.
Yeah.
That wasn't what the video was. It was me drinking while we
Sure.
were making a beer. I never actually make the beer, you guys. I just sometimes I put some hops in the kettle and smile for a picture. I don't actually make beer. But you could see. You could see that clearly this idea of people making beer and this experience of making beer and this process of making beer, people want to see it, and there isn't nearly enough of it happening on YouTube. I mean, I'll say that I think that any brewery that does not have some kind of a YouTube channel, even if it's not like a regular thing, walking people through kind of day-to-day stuff, just every once in a while, just putting up a video of like, hey, we're doing this today. Let's here, come in, watch us do it.
People like people
crazy.
too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, people, it's even when you look at X or Twitter, whatever you call it. I mean, so much of even that platform, which used to be 120, 140 characters, whatever it is, so much of it is video. And that's what gets people to pause scrolling is generally action, right? So, I mean, that was kind of the idea. The big picture behind it was it definitely scratched some of that teaching itch that I have. I love training people, and when I was at Cartridge, I had two new people that I was training into the industry, and that was amazing, and it was a blast. And so it was one of those things where it's like, well, if I can help people make better choices about where they want to be going in the industry, answer some questions, and I really try to never like come across as like this this guru sitting on top of the mountain. I'm just sharing with you what I know and what I am trying at the moment, right? A lot of times I try for things to be research-based. I try to stay current, and I try things with the equipment that I have, you know, so.
Well, so when did that kind of, that link or that decision happen that you're like, oh my gosh, like there's a need for this out there in the content consumption world via YouTube or Facebook or whatever it may be. When did that like thing happen? You're like, oh, I'm doing this thing. I'm making beer, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I could also do this stuff and kind of bring this together.
Yeah, I was scrolling around the internet, and I happened upon this guy, Gary V. He's
heard of him.
Yeah, and I mean, people can have different opinions, one way or the other. He's a bit of he has some strong takes. But one thing that I liked.
There's been a few nights at like 3 a.m. where I'm sitting there with a beer in my hand, and Gary V gets me all fired up, and I'm like, I need to change my life.
Well, and he was saying, one of his things was, he was saying that as a professional, if you have an area of interest that you're passionate about and you feel compelled to share that, he said, then you should be making content. Professionally, more people should be making content.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, and so I started thinking, okay, well, what if I did some brew day videos, stuff like that? And it kind of spun up from there. And it morphed. I mean, the original idea was it would only be in brewery content.
Right.
I got the okay from ownership at Cartridge at that time to do that. And then it kind of started spinning up into other things. So I started to do a live stream Q&A, which is it's the bulk of my content right now, because I do release a video a day on YouTube. And So I can cut those individual questions.
Right.
Those questions come in from pros, people getting ready to open their own place, home brewers aspiring to be pro brewers. So I take those. Those live streams are usually about 2 hours long, 2.25, and then chop those up for a lot of daily video stuff. And then I've also added a Industry Pro podcast, which is another live monthly show where I will just get together with somebody else in the industry, get their story a little bit, and talk beer some as well. Some are more beer heavy.
Right.
And some are, and this is kind of the other thing that I like to focus on. I also like to have kind of a career leadership like focus with things, because being and I'm not saying this about me, but being great at making beer doesn't make you a success in this industry.
That's definitely true.
Right? Like there's other key components, right? And so and again, this isn't like I'm this guy that's figured everything out, but I'll at least tell you the stuff I figured out by getting kicked in the teeth, So
well,
yeah.
you also have to kind of figure out if you want to be in this industry, you have to figure out where your place in that industry is. You have to understand that there are some roads you can go down that are probably not the right one for you, whereas other ones are the right one, and try to figure those out. The only way to do that is to find out from people that have already gone down those roads. And, especially with an industry like craft beer, where it still is so young. Mm-hmm. There isn't a lot of information just out there right now about that. You can't just go and figure it out. You have to talk to people that have tried it and sometimes succeeded, sometimes failed, and figure out why. And so I think those conversations are extremely important, especially for people that are either in the industry or want to be in the industry.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by them as a craft beer drinker, just to kind of hear again, the personal stories behind different breweries and how people do what they do and got where they are, or where they're going kind of in their head. It's that fascinates me, but it's if you're wanting to be in the industry, it's so valuable.
Yeah, it's the rest of the picture, right?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to, and that's kind of the other thing too. Another reason when I'm trying to weigh pros and cons, thinking about doing the YouTube thing, it's first of all it's intimidating. Because you're going to be putting your face out there. You open yourself to ridicule.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I've received very little, which is nice.
I will, and for anybody that's wanting to create content, which hopefully some of the people that are watching this are those people. And I just realized I didn't. That's fine. It's my camera.
You can go.
No, it's still on.
it.
So I didn't plug it into the battery. So at some point, or maybe it just
you can jump
out.
over and
It's
plug
fine.
it in.
It's fine. It's fine. Your camera is plugged in. It's the only one that's really important. We can talk about all of these. That's another topic we'll talk about here in a second. But what was I just saying? See, now I completely forgot. I lost my train of thought. People that are kind of watching this that want to be content creators.
Yeah.
Everybody will tell you that there are negative comments that you'll get, which there are, and you have to develop a thick skin to some of that stuff. But I don't want people to think that that's like the normal out there. Most people are awesome.
Yeah.
Most people want new content from you. Most people want to hear what you're saying. They want you to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they're very supportive about it. Like the negative comments are by far outweighed by the amount of positive ones out there.
Yeah.
With that being said, when a negative one comes in, it feels louder than all of the positive.
100%. 100%.
But the majority of things that are out there are people that are supportive. And if you're wanting to create content, don't let this fear of negativity stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
Worst comes to worst, let your significant other or somebody manage all of the comments as they're coming in.
Well, and I think a big thing for me is I've tried to very much like come at things with the outlook of try to be humble, humility, and be grateful. It's a wild thing to me that when I live stream that there will be people in the chat that first of all that they're not just like from this town or whatever, and somebody will be like, oh, I'm from so-and-so, I'm from this country. I'm like, that's wild to me. And then sometimes people will be like, oh, I finally made a live chat or something. It's like, that's that's humbling. That's a very cool thing, you know. So and I think that's one of the things that diffuses some of those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you walk into it with some hopefully obviously goodwill. I think that is the super majority of stuff is positive.
Let's talk about the process of content creation. So, what have been some of the hurdles that you've had to kind of figure out, jump through, solve, and what are some of the things that maybe? Well, let's start with that. What are some of the hurdles that you ran into when you decided, you know what, this is going to be a thing? I'm going to create content.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, really now it's it's easier than ever. You know,
it is.
Most of the stuff that I've shot on my channel was shot on an iPhone 8.
People need to understand that like you see some of us out there with like fancy cameras or like microphones and things like that. You do not need that to make content. Like I'll be straight up. Like this camera that I'm shooting over here, I like my phone better than that. I like my phone better than that camera. I would sooner take my phone and shoot with it than that one. And so like you can do it with anything you have.
Sure.
The idea is just to make content.
Yes. Yeah, and you really do have to just get out and start doing it. Some of the hurdles, honestly, they were mostly mental. I knew that, and this isn't like I knew that there weren't people showing the professional brewing process online, so I felt like the content wasn't the issue. What was happening wasn't the issue. That's not the problem. The issue for me was realizing that one, especially when I'm recording in the brewery, I'm not live. I don't have to be nervous. I don't have to use everything as soon as I hit record. There's like this weird thing where it's like, well, I'm recording. Oh, I screwed up. No, you didn't screw up. You just say it again.
Right.
And then so I found that I started to make video that was easier to edit because I had started editing my stuff. And then I just realized, I just need to stop talking, go back and restart the sentence after a brief pause. And so and then you even start learning how to shoot too. You're like, oh, well, I recorded all this before and it was garbage. So why set the camera up? These are my primary shots that I need to be getting, right? And so just reps builds that out. I didn't know a lot of stuff. If I didn't have my buddy Andy, who really did a lot of the brew day editing up front, and he's helping me again. There's a period of time where he wasn't able to help me out. He got me used to using. I used Adobe Rush for the stuff that I edit, so I know that's like not the most complex thing, but quite honestly, it works. It works for what I'm doing, so just some things like that. I think the biggest hurdle is just getting yourself to do it and getting yourself to do it frequently, repeatedly. Right?
Well, that's you mentioned Gary Vee earlier, and not that he's any kind of piece of the show, but
sure,
brought
to you by Gary Vee.
He's a great example of that. Like he makes a ton of content, and most of his content, like technically speaking, kind of sucks. Like but it's the fact that he's making it, and the content that is in there is great, and the frequency of it is great. And he's just always making content. Like that is the secret to all of it.
Yes.
If you put enough short form content on one of the platforms that likes short form content, the platform will start to like you more, and it will start to figure out who you are and push it to the right people. And like it's just doing it, just making the reps and doing it.
So like right now, I'm not certain that I'm going to make with the podcast, if I include the podcast, it's like 380 pieces of content a year. Right. I don't know if that's what in 5 years what the channel's going to look like, but there is frequency is a big part of it. One, just to give yourself reps to get better at it, but then also that's what the algorithm wants to be fed. Right.
That was a big focus and a big struggle for me in the last year was that I wasn't going to make content just to make content. Like if I was going to put something out, it was because it was something that I wanted to make. If I was going to make a video, it had to be a video that I really wanted to put the time into to make it what I wanted that video to look like. Whereas we're shifting gears a little bit this year. we're going to crank some stuff out.
Yeah.
It
yeah.
won't all be perfect,
Yeah.
but we're going to crank stuff out. Like you just have to kind of figure out from day to day, month to month, year to year, where you are as a creator, or where you are in your life, because life makes it difficult too.
Sure. Well, and it's also what do you actually want to accomplish with what you're doing, and I've had to have that conversation with myself, with my wife, with my friends, many times, because I've set up this thing where I said I release a video on YouTube every day, and I've had other content creators on the YouTube side say that that's concerning. Like that's a lot of stuff to put out. Now I have a system that works pretty well, and I have a backlog of in brewery content where the interesting thing is, so even though I do drop a video a day, a lot of them right now are the Q&A snippets, which are very content brewing heavy, usually brewing science heavy. Still, I mean, every month one of my top viewed videos is, dry hopping cold, right, at cooler temperatures, right, and just talking about that practice and how I've done it in the brewery. The thumbnail's not great. I'm not great in it, right? You know what I mean? Because I was early and it was new, right? I mean, I was green when I was doing that stuff. So if I were to do it now, like, it would technically be better, but it's still it's one of my higher viewed stuff, so yeah, it's interesting.
It's hard as a creator too not to get stuck in some of that stuff and see, like, okay, like I made this video and a bunch of people clicked on it and keep clicking on it and they keep wanting it. I'm going to make another video like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to make another video like that.
Yeah.
And get stuck in this thing of just trying to please, be it the algorithm or the viewers or whatever it is, just trying to do the thing that you think they are wanting versus the things that you want to make.
Yeah.
Like, how do you balance some of that stuff out, and how do you kind of put those blinders on when they need to be on and take them off when they need to be off?
Yeah, I have an advantage when it comes to especially the live stream Q&A and in some ways the industry pro interview that I do, because that's all the viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call them, subscribers, get telling me what they want to know about, right? So my subscriber base is actually feeding me content. So that makes it easy. And then it's, as far as the brewery side of things go for me, it's whatever is the new research I'm reading, new things we're trying in the brewery. So that side of it kind of feeds itself. And I am to that point now to where I have enough people, whether it be on Instagram or on YouTube. I put the call out a couple times as I get close to it.
But it wasn't always that way.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
So before that, as you're trying to find your legs under this, and you're trying to get an audience built, like, how did you kind of find those things that you focused on and the things that maybe you ignored and kind of went your own way?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be able to give, and because such a big focus of the channel is like actually an educational thing, I had all these nuts and bolts processes that I just needed to fit in. And I, to be honest, I've never really had to deal with what am I going to talk about next, because that on the brewing side, I
laugh. It was a running joke. Like, when I had co-hosts on this show, that was a joke every time we hit record.
Yeah.
Like, we would start out the show, and when we started the show, it was just us sitting around a table with 4 or 5 beers, and we would start talking about what was happening in Cincinnati beer.
Yeah.
And every time, Mike, the guy that started the show, he would look at me and he's like, "Dude, what are we going to talk about?" I'm like, "It's okay. It's like, there's enough happening. Like, well, you'll see. It'll be fine."
Yeah.
Just every single time. What are we going to talk about?
and I think I was fortunate that I never really hit, because I was so busy with knowing the stuff that I wanted to cover and having. So I did hit a point where I'm like, well, I just can't show you the brew day. Like, I actually have to start adding things to it in the way that, like, when I was brewing Munich Dunkel, one of the key components of brewing that style, I think, is leveraging roast malt to create balance in a beer without necessarily creating a ton of roast flavor, right? So there are some brew day episodes where it's not just the same thing, but where I try to discuss something specific that's overarching.
I actually think I was listening to some of the other episodes that you've been on this show, and the very first episode, I don't remember what the beer was, but there was some dark beer that was on tap there for the grand opening of Cartridge. It wasn't a Dunkel, obviously. You hadn't lagered anything yet, but and that came up, like that idea of using dark malts that also will kind of still make it kind of creamy and easy drinking, and kind of without some of that roasty kind of sharper roast, I guess.
Yeah, that was actually, I think it was probably for Holster, which was a hazelnut cream stout.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you bring it up because I just listened to it like this week.
Absolutely.
It's the idea that God, I'm trying to think of how I'm wording this. This process that we go through as not just content creators, but like in any thing that you do, any job, any hobby, anything that you do, it's like it's a process. Like you start here, and like there's not really even an ending spot, but you're taking this journey through that, this story through kind of where you're headed with this thing. And like to be able to find platforms or people or sources that can help kind of poke you in certain directions is such a valuable thing. And I don't know if everybody is as nerdy about it as probably I am, where I think a lot of people like will be sitting around like, oh, have you watched this TV show? I don't really watch TV shows. Like, I don't know if you understand what my life is like. Like, if I'm going to be entertained, it's something that is like it's also pushing me further somewhere else. Like, I'm watching a YouTube video that is about making podcasts. Like, I can make a podcast, but I don't know what that person knows about making podcasts and what it might do to the way I think about doing it, or making videos, or doing this, or taking pictures, or whatever it may be. And like, are we normal, or are we weird?
Well, I do watch. I watch more YouTube than I ever have.
Right.
Since I've been making YouTube content, I watch more shorts than I ever have, and just understanding like the structure of what people are doing is such a big thing. Pace is such a big thing. Like
shorts, it's crazy.
Yeah,
like
it is.
It's to a frustrating point sometimes. Like sometimes you want to make something and you just want to make it, and you're like, this is what I want it to look like.
Yeah.
But I know that's not how it's supposed to look. I know that's not what you're supposed to do.
Well, and even in like the brew day stuff that I've done at Cartridge, when I started editing those, I started editing them a lot faster than my friend was editing them. A lot less dead air. And I don't care if there's and this is just me. I don't care if there's like hard cuts.
Here's the other thing to think about though. Is if you had a long form video of the brew day where it's just the ambiance of making beer, that would do well too.
So that's actually like when I was thinking, because I've thought a lot about this. Like there's the weird thing is, I don't know if it's weird or not, but the strange thing is there's so many different consumers. So like there's some people that if I could rig cameras in a brewery, multiple cameras in a brewery, somewhat appropriately lit, and just stream from the time I walk into work and the time I go home, there's people that will watch that.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Like if I was sitting there, like sometimes I'm sitting downstairs and I'm doing work, I'm editing, or I'm doing something, and like I need something on in the background. I can't consume an actual podcast or watch a video at that time because I'm trying to actually focus on something. I just need something in the background.
Yeah.
I'm totally put up a video of somebody make a beer.
Yep.
Well,
and the tough thing is so like I kind of view myself a little bit like in the maker space as well, right? So, but like there's a YouTube channel that I watch called Blacktail Studios, and he does like a lot of like epoxy tables and woodworking stuff. Okay. The advantage he has, and what I'm really jealous of, is it's incredibly visual. and there's a massive payoff by the end.
Right.
And so what I struggle
This
what I
outside
struggle
of
with
beer.
is my payoff is beer in a glass.
Right.
And that doesn't do anything for anybody, right? There's no huge, I mean, and you can do cool camera work and stuff, but like watching somebody take a raw piece of wood and then turn it into this amazing, beautiful, shiny thing is a different payoff than what I'm doing with a brew day, right?
We put clear water in, and now it's brown.
Exactly, right? And so like even thinking about your video through that lens, and so that always tilts me in a different direction. So the supermajority of my brew day videos, the last video is actually me sitting down with the beer, full recipe breakdown, and doing tasting notes on it. That in my mind, that's the best thing that I can do functionally for the payoff at the end, right? So I mean, there's limits to there's limits to things, and you know the flip side is you know we have a lot of beautiful shiny equipment, but everything's happening in an enclosed space, and I can give you the shot inside the mash tun, inside the lauter tun, inside the kettle, but that's only magic for so long, right? You know what I mean? So that's where what I usually end up trying to go back on, which is kind of a natural instinct for me, is from my teaching days, is just teaching through stuff as well. So yes, you have the visual of what's happening, but also the teaching educational side.
Right. Let's talk about kind of the bigger picture of beer as we kind of wrap things up here a little bit. You've been in the industry for a long time. Things keep changing.
Yeah.
I know that you, or I assume, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you tend to lean more into the tradition of brewing and the traditional side of beer versus kind of the even this is not an accurate statement, the trendy side of things, which traditional can be trendy, and that's a whole other argument. But what are things that are happening in beer right now that do kind of get you excited about changes or things that maybe were different than when you started? And on the flip side, what things maybe aren't awesome? Yeah,
we're entering. Bart Watson from the Brewers Association said that we're kind of maturing as an industry now, right? It's not the rocket ship on growth is probably over for the industry for a period of time, and there's probably going to be some contraction. And I think did we see 450 breweries close in 2023?
Something like that.
Somewhere in the range.
It was like
plus
the exact same number that opened closed.
Sure. Yeah. And I think I think that beer is such a part of our cultural fabric that it's not going away. Because on the pro side of things, and you probably see things out there, but there's people that are nervous and this, that, or the other thing. I don't think beer is going to lose its place, its cultural place. I do think that generationally people drink different than the people before them.
Sure.
And so there's going to be some of that. We've seen, the rise of, well, it was ciders going to kill beer. And then it was, seltzer, RTDs, X, Y, and Z spirits, now NA, the conversation surrounding NA. And, I think what this brings the focus on increasingly is, and I like to say that, great beer isn't a business plan. And I'm not trying to be funny or anything like that.
We all know that you have to have great beer and a really cool logo.
Sure. And then the flip side is this, and this isn't a negative comment. I think most beer consumers know the difference between good and bad. I don't think as many know the difference between good and great. All right. Now, because I think sometimes when we're in craft beer, we have our craft beer sphere of, our beer geeks, and we're all beer geeks and stuff like that. But they're not the super majority of customers. It's a hardcore base, right? But it's still not the super majority of beer customers. And I think sometimes people get into the saying, "I make good beer. I'm going to open a brewery," and they forget that they're opening a hospitality company, and they're opening a business, and there's a lot of things that go into that, and so what my thought is going forward, industry wise, I think people who are on point, both quality wise and business wise, are going to be the folks that survive. And again, I think things are cyclical, and I think things will trend again. If I'd be on the path to being a much richer man if I knew what that next turn would be. But we're already seeing, and people kind of talk about it for a
wine,
while.
right? That's the only thing that hasn't really had some kind of resurgence in my lifetime is wine.
yeah, right. But I think the industry is going to be fine, and you just don't have unlimited growth. And so there'll be some contraction, but I think overall, I think we'll be in a good place.
That's I think that sometimes you talk about the people that are all doom and gloom about what the industry looks like, and I get it. Like, it is a scary thing, especially if you have dumped your life savings into starting a business. 100%. I get it.
Yes.
But so I was on another podcast. Shout out to Brewcast Happy Hour. They had me on for the Christmas show, and
nice.
I think it was in that episode that they asked me, "Is the golden age of craft beer over?"
Yeah.
And I even now when I think about that, it makes me laugh because I think it's just starting. I think we are now finally able to hit the golden age of craft beer. We were in this really crazy period where people were figuring out what the industry looks like and how to be in it and how to be successful in it. And now we've got that. Now we have, you look at the places around us,
mm-hmm.
This is it. Craft beer has never been better.
Mm-hmm.
We're finally, you can, no matter where you live, especially in this city, no matter where you live, you can drive a few miles and there's a brewery, and a great brewery at that.
Yeah.
Probably even a couple of them.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. That's a fun spot for the industry to be in. Now, will all of those places survive? We'll see.
Yeah.
They can.
Yeah.
I think there's no reason that they couldn't, as long as they are able to manage the different sides of what it means to run a craft brewery.
Well, and when I got into the industry too, it was everybody's goal back then. It was 6-pack bottles, but it was everybody's goal to to have your 10-barrel system, throw some beer into bottles, get it into Meyer or Kroger or whatever, right. And then be the next founders. And I think the days of somebody like Ryan Geist starting with a 15-barrel and then turning into a regional brewery, I think those days are waning. I think the places that are.
I don't think Matry would argue with that.
Well, Matry is another one that they have a big distribution footprint. But for that to be the plan,
I don't think, and they can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I don't think they're making any more beer today than they made when they were on that 15-barrel system, beating the shit out of it.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of in the same place they are now. Now where that business is shifting. But
you can see people doubling down on tap rooms now, right?
Yep.
Because you can sell that product at full margin, right? And it's about consumer experience.
Full margin and control, which I think we've established in this show throughout the years. I'm a bit of a control freak. I still don't understand how it would feel okay to me to make something and then send it out into the world. Let somebody else pour it out of their taps and trust that they're doing it the right way. I can't do it.
Sitting on store shelves warm,
no way I can do
that
it.
Whole thing is tough, and but yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like, but I do think there is spots in an underserved area, because we're talking about community bars, right? And I think that there's especially a place for somebody not just to go and drink, but to have something to do as well.
Sure.
You look at 50 West and what they have going on at their primary location there at the production house, and they've got volleyball, they've got cornhole, they've got pickleball. You can have the kids there playing in the sand. Going to that brewery is just not going to a brewery. There's options. There's things to do while you're there.
But even outside of the idea of playing pickleball with your craft brewery, there's still experiences around beer. The places that have great food, the places that have a really great beer garden, and that's the experience there.
Yeah.
Places that have maybe even places that still have like some kind of little dinky tap room where you walk in and the brewer's probably behind the bar because they don't have that many employees.
Definitely.
You know,
Definitely.
like, that's still an experience.
Definitely.
Like, and to find that place and to find your place within that and to really own it and to really do it well, I think will make anybody successful. But
Definitely.
well, I should say almost anyone's. There's some. I don't know. What's the best thing that you've drank that you did not make in the last couple weeks?
Oh gosh, so something you might not know. I haven't. I can answer this.
Are you
So
doing dry January?
I'm not doing dry January. I'm doing something far more severe. I have not drank a traditionally brewed beer since February of last year.
Oh,
And I have developed a fairly severe gluten sensitivity.
oh no!
And it's the last two normally brewed beers I had a couple of Pilsners with Ryan over at 50 West. We did a collab with them, and he had this Pilsner he was proud of. It was a beautiful beer, and that's what I miss out on the most is having a friend have something they're proud of. I had two of those beers, and I get, like, for days afterwards, severe depression and anxiety. And it's so bad that I don't even miss it.
Okay.
But I will say this. There's a product called Brewer's Clarex. It's an enzyme that you can add during fermentation, which does not make a gluten-free beer, but it makes a gluten-reduced beer. So I did share a couple beers with my dear friend Josh Toft, who's head brewer over at Cartridge. And we shared a killer brown porter that he has on tap over there right now, which is a great beer for this time of year because it's dark, it's roasty, but it's still lower ABV beer, which I still kind of like because you can session them out. And he has a killer cold IPA on over there as well. I'm forgetting the names of both beers, but that cold IPA, clear, beautiful, bright, low body, but still plenty of fruitiness popping out of that thing, nice and complex. And that brown porter he has is right in my wheelhouse because I'm kind of a session beer guy. So,
do we think that breweries should have some kind of thing to let people know, like, easily that if they're using like that Clarex stuff? Because there are a lot of people that maybe gluten isn't going to kill them. Like,
Yes.
you know, the gluten, I mean, in here, there's gluten in the air everywhere.
Sure.
You know, there's gluten everywhere. But there's a lot of people that have figured out that there is some kind of an allergy or some kind of an insensitivity or something to it.
Sure.
And I know that there are a lot of breweries that are using that Clarex in their beers that they can't legally say that they are gluten-free, but they are about as close as you can possibly get.
I think legally they can be gluten reduced,
Yes.
and so you start walking a line of what is the benefit? Is there going to be somebody that thinks the beer is weird because it's gluten reduced? Because I'll say this: I've used Brewers Clarex on long-standing lagers that I've made, and I've not seen flavor foam. Any impact on those beers?
Going back to Madry, I think they use it on almost everything. I think.
Well, it's one of the primary functions. It's supposed to be able to extend filter life. Okay, so that's one of the things is that it's actually supposed to make beers easier to filter. So that's one of the main things. So there's actually a production purpose for it.
It's basically dropping all of the stuff out of the beer.
Theoretically, I believe breaking down those molecules, making them both more filterable, more readily filterable, and then also having the side effect of not impacting people with sensitivities. So for me, I have not had probably more than 2 beers in a sitting since last year, and they've all been Clarex beers. So I know for me, they don't bother me. But then again, I haven't had like a big drinking session or a few days of drinking with it either. But wouldn't it be easier
if you could just walk into a store and like know the beers that you could look at and be like, all right, so I know that this is good and this is good and this is not good. Like it's I think there are a lot of people in that boat right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's going to be the enzyme side of things like that help out with some of the different whether they be ABV, not so much the low ABV, but I think ultimately probably the gluten thing is probably long-term going to be an enzyme-based thing.
I think between enzyme science and yeast science, I think that is the future of kind of the innovations that we'll see next.
It's crazy to see the volume that's going on the genetic modification of yeast. The things that they're doing on that front is really wild.
I'm not a real scientist. I just play one on a couple of videos, but I think that there's no reason that somebody can't figure out a way to poke a yeast in the right way and make a beer without spitting out alcohol. It has to happen.
Omega and BSI are doing a lot with that right now. There are more and more alcohol-free yeasts out there, and more techniques being used. I'm getting ready to interview Mitch Steele from New Realm, formerly of Stone, and I was listening to some stuff of his as research, and they were talking about. I think they're doing like a vacuum distillation thing. There's a lot of different ways to slice that one, and there's troubles there's difficulties no matter which way you go.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot of new stuff.
There's crazy stuff happening. If anybody wants to know more about what you're doing on whatever side of your life they want to know about it, what's the best way for them to get in touch? Best way to follow you? Let them know.
Yeah, I'm Adam Makes Beer on Instagram and YouTube, and that's really the two big. I haven't transferred my personal Facebook to officially Adam Makes Beer, but my stuff gets dropped over there too. And I've a couple of monthly live streams, and if you sub to the Instagram side of things, you'll be able to stay in line with everything there.
I appreciate what you're doing so much. I think that it's a much needed place in Cincinnati's beer content creation, and
well, that's kind of you, man. And I was gonna say at one point it's cool sitting down with the godfather of Cincy beer. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and especially being a new guy coming into town. You've always been very generous with your time with me.
Because you make good beer.
That's kind.
If you made bad beer, I would never talk to you. just let's see, who can I call? Just ask Andy Reynolds down at Alexandria. You make bad beer, I'll just never talk to you. It's a joke, guys. He's the most. He's been on the show more than anybody else, and I think he'll be on next week. So we'll see if he listens. Thank you very much. I appreciate everything you do. Keep up the great work. Everybody go support Adam and all of the things he does, including here at Sonder. Huge shout out to Sonder for hosting. I don't think they knew they were hosting. We just kind of took over Sonder Studios officially, which everything is unplugged, and that hurts my soul. We should have talked about that a little bit. Out of all of the breweries in town, this is the one that finally was starting to get it, and they were cranking out podcasts, and they got the idea of content creation, and then they let the ball drop on me.
Well, they are. I do know they've done a couple recently. I'm not sure if they're posted or not.
They did two this year, and then haven't done anything else posted that I know of since then. So just hurts my soul, guys. Come on, crank some stuff out. If anybody wants to support this show, you can just share with your friends. That's the best way to do it. But if you have extra money laying around, you can help that way too by going to thegnarlygnome.com/support. My wife loves it every time a new subscriber comes in on there, and she tells me that I'm finally going to be a real blogger one of these days. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to be down at Alexandria. It's not officially on the calendar yet, so if it's not there, I'm sorry. But there'll be something, and then there'll be something the next week, because that one is on the calendar. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe, share. You guys know the deal. We'll see you then. Cincy Brewcast, it's the voice of Cincy Craft.